Yes. Hello. Hello, everyone. All of you, all two of you. My apologies, it's been such a busy day. Hey, Torbjörn, good to see you. Rochelle. Um, I got so caught up today that I didn't post anything about the live stream today, so we might not have many people. But anyway, we can have a little bit of a discussion if anyone has anything they'd like to bring up. The book's very exciting. I know that I keep dragging it on, but with the printer cancelling on us, Mark, with the printer cancelling on us, it actually gave us a little bit of breathing time and a little bit of space to do a little bit of tweaking here and there. So added some things, changed some things. So hopefully, it's like, no, I don't know. It's like putting a student into a tournament. You know how good they are, but you hope that you hope that they do well. It's like I was thinking today. It's like a sequel to a movie. If the first movie is really, really good, and the second one, so often it wasn't as good as the first one. Well, I just hope I've added some really good information. I know that. So fingers crossed, people will find it interesting. Urs, Herman, Frederick, good to see you. Harry. So anyway, I'm just going to do a reading today from the Budo Blueprint again. I've been busy today. I'll see if I can show you. I've been doing, see those pieces of paper there? They're all my calligraphies that I'm doing, the new calligraphies, and there's some calligraphies. See those calligraphies up there? I've just been doing my calligraphies today to get some new artwork ready for the book. It's good to pull the brush out again. I use I'll put it on there. Mike, good to see you, man. Raj, good to see you. Namaste. And Mike Clarkos. I'll show you the brush I use. It's just a normal calligraphy brush. I'm just letting it dry at the moment because I was doing some before this is the calligraphy brush that I use. But if you have a look, this section up here I haven't even used. So you can see the end section is darker. I just try to use just the very tip of it. So it's much easier to do the calligraphy, because if I go too big, I need big pieces of paper and it's just too time consuming. So I just do, sheet of them like this. That's Ichigeki. And then I'll find one I end up liking. I've got, oh, bloody hell, I just tore it in half. That'll teach me for being a smart aleck. Luckily, I tore in half the one that I don't like. But there's some more Ichigekis that I'm doing. Ichigeki means a single fist, the single punch. But anyway, so it's been a lot of fun pulling this old calligraphy brush out, which goes back many, many decades almost. Well, Sven, good to see you. Mike, hope everything's good in Florida. Leo, good to see you. So today, I mentioned briefly last week that I had a section. Somebody had brought up a bit about karate as a therapy and how it's really good for you, and I really think it's good for you too. And in fact, I think Kyokushin even more so than other styles because of the kiais. It's nothing in a Kyokushin class to kiai really loud 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 times, and I think that adds to it too. So good. Usgaza, Daniel, good to see you guys. So I think I'm just going to read from this section that I've written about Kyokushin as a therapy modality. In fact, that's the karate training as a therapy modality. Before I do, Patreon folks, thank you very much. I've got 3 levels of Patreon, and thankfully most people are on the 12. I had every now and then 1 or 2 of the 12 people drop back, but I've just had a few of the $3 and I think $7 people upgrade to the 12, and some of the $12 go above and beyond and actually make a bigger amount. Gosh, it helps, and I really appreciate it, and I hope that everybody's enjoying what we're doing. And I know there's going to be a lot more now that the book is winding down in terms of time. I'll have more time to devote to the Patreon family as well. But if you're not a member of family, by all means, jump in. Ken, good on you, man. And Paul, I got your message about Nukite training, Paul. I did send you a response. Let me know if you received it. And I'm more than happy to talk about that here today too. And Mike Clark, I appreciate your communication. I've really been a bit busy to get back, but I spoke to the designer and everything that I wanted to put in the book that we discussed, I just can't get it in this time. So what I'm going to do is put it in the Budo blueprint. And on reflection, even he said that it's probably more appropriate to put in there anyway. So anyway, guys, thanks for your ongoing feedback and love. So I'm going to read now from this section of the book. It's called Karate Training as a Therapy Modality. I'm neither a trained scientist nor a therapist. These are just thoughts and observations based on many decades of teaching experience, some experience with people having to deal with various types of trauma, my own personal experiences, an extensive amount of study and research, anecdotal observation, a love for Kyokushin, and a firm conviction that the benefits of training run deeper than we are immediately aware of. It is possible that you may have come to similar conclusions based on your own training observations. Masoyama was emphatic that whilst karate is a training system designed to make its participants effective fighters, it is primarily a spiritual journey of self-perfection, or at least self-improvement. It stands to reason, therefore, that karate has many layers which may serve to alleviate the stress and pain of trauma and provide ways that can help a student return to a perfectly normal life after serious trauma. Pal, good to see you. Rob De Souza from Tassie. And Paul, yeah, thanks. Good on you. Yeah. Well, I'm talking to Paul Higginson. I have really serious reservations about that. And in a nutshell, Paul and I have been discussing about different ways to work in Nukite. You know, people do it in buckets of pebbles and sand and beans and so on. And I'm really personally against it, and I've always discouraged my students from doing it, mainly because if you look at the energy meridians in the body, particularly you can find that in the Chinese medicine, how the energy meridians flow down the fingers and back like this. There's anecdotal evidence, at least, to show that people who have done a lot of Nukite training, it affects the energy flows in their body. And in particular, it plays with their head a little bit. Probably not unlike doing performance-enhancing drugs and the way that, they call it roid rage when people do steroids and so on. And interestingly, in Chinese medicine, it's the liver, which is the organ attached to rage and anger. And for people who do performance-enhancing drugs and steroids, it's the liver that gets overloaded and hits capacity and can't function fully. So I think it's similar to that. All the different organs have connection to emotion. We know that, when we're scared, our kidneys are related to fear. And when someone is scared, often they'll wet their pants. When we feel love, we feel it in the heart. Well, the heart is the organ that's associated with the emotion of love. So this sort of thing can go on and on. But the more to the point is all of those meridians flow up and down the fingertips. And when you do that conditioning, Paul, it can interrupt the flow. To a degree, the fingers suffer damage anyway, and it can survive. But when you're actually doing it repetitively like that, just need to be a little careful of that, I think. So anyway, let's keep reading here. The science of the mind and spirit is, I think, just beginning, or rather just being reawakened after centuries of being asleep and ignored. Treatment modalities for PTSD and related disorders are under endless development. Even the term PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, was not coined until 1980, despite evidence of our having to deal with its symptoms throughout history. Karate training as a formalized process is also very new. The full range of benefits found in training may not be known for a long time simply because the empirical research is not there. And just because the research isn't there doesn't mean you deny it. I mean, even before all the empirical evidence that ever existed exists, the rules of science existed, the laws of nature existed. You know, water boiled at 100 degrees at centigrade at sea level, you know. And as you know, I've mentioned Semmelweis. This is why I call this whole period we're going through now Semmelweis 2.0, simply because Semmelweis was the guy in the middle of the 19th century who suggested we should wash our hands. And they literally hounded him out of the medical profession and drove him insane. He knew he was right. And it's only years later that we realize, and look what's happening now. This is why I call it Semmelweis 2.0, with this COVID and everybody being encouraged to wash their hands and sanitize and so on. The rate of flu and other infections related to, you know, lack of cleanliness has really plummeted down. So that's good. Apparently people who do excessive fingers conditioning and the like, they lose the ability to grasp coins, lay flat downwards, laying flat. That's interesting. That could be right. I'm not convinced nukite is a bad technique per se. Often is a poor understanding. Yeah, I agree. I love nukite. In fact, when I was 17, I used to be really pretty good at nukite, and I'd actually do nukite through boards. The most I ever did was 2. But everyone used to think that I was, when I do it at Hombu, we had all these boards left over after the 8th All Japan Championship, and we were just mucking around with the Uchideshi, and I got someone to hold one, and I did a nukite. And they go, wow, do that again. So I put 2 up and I went whack and I got through it. And then I'm getting blood blisters. I realize it with nukite. You get blood blisters if your nails are longer than the tip of your finger because it pushes your nail black. So I was getting blood. But they thought, they were watching me because they thought I was doing it like this. I'd go 1, 2, then I'd go boom, break the board, and as I went through, straighten my fingers again. I know some people do that, but I wasn't. And they go, no, you are. And so I've done one, and it got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. So I've gone, boom, and there were 3 indents on the board from the 3 tips of my fingers. And needless to say, that's right down the alley, what Mike is saying, that just it's poor understanding of appropriate targets. I can tell you now, boards are not an appropriate target for nukite. You know, I think nukite is great in the neck. It's great in the eye. You know it's good in the eye because even UFC, which arguably has the most or amongst the most minimalist fighting rules of any combat sport, they do not allow fighters to even fight with their hands open forward. If they want to open their hands, they have to have the fingers up. They can't use their fingertips, use their hand to hold guys at bay with their fingers horizontal because of the danger of guys getting the fingers in the eyes. And you've only got to watch what happens when these guys get a nukite in the eye. And this is another thing that people don't understand about Masayama, even though he was all about the fist and he talks about knocking guys out with single punch and so on. When he was primarily in the street fighting, it was all nukite, koken, and palm heels. He rarely used a fist in the street. Now, why that happened, I'm not too sure. I think it had something to do with him being fearful that he'd actually hurt someone, like kill someone. Because if he's knocking them out with a palm heel, and a light palm heel at that, imagine what he was doing. And, you know, when he hit them in the ribs and cracked 6 ribs or something, I don't know. It was just the level. It's really hard for people to accept how hard he hit. Bobby Lowe used to say, people just don't get it, how incredibly powerful he was, you know. So anyway, I agree with Mike there, and I can agree with Mike on first-hand experience. Don't do board breaking with nukite. It took me, you know, a few weeks before the blood blisters went away. And since then, I've always cut my nails really short, just in case. full range of benefits found in training may not be known for a long time simply because the empirical research is not there. After all, which medical-related company is going to fund research into something which may prove their own money-making products are redundant because the benefits of simply going to the dojo and training consistently are as effective, or perhaps more so, and with less harmful side effects than the treatments they offer? Still, despite the lack of scientific research, at least at this point, therapists researching the mind and trauma are already seeing the potential and recommending such things as kickboxing and other forms of exercise to their patients. I have some thoughts on training as a therapy, especially the training traditions of Masayama and Kyokushin karate. I'm just going to keep flipping back. Also, Kenneth, good to see you, man. Hope everything's going well in Melbourne there. The incredible volume and nature of post-trauma stress in society is breathtaking. And I've only become more and more aware of this in the last 10 years. My childhood was as close to idyllic as you can imagine. I had two saintly parents, sisters who were just wonderful, an environment surrounded by fantastically gentle, kind people, and the most salubrious environment in the world growing up at the beach at Surfers Paradise. So trauma to me was stubbing my toe. That's about as traumatic as my life was. And then later on in life, when I met people who did suffer from all kinds of PTSD, the first one being my good cousin who did 2 tours in Vietnam as a medic, and he never recovered psychologically. It was only in the last 10 years that I've really given consideration to how seriously deep PTSD runs in our society. And you've got returned veterans, we all know about that. And then you have people from child abuse, sexual abuse, violent abuse, all kind. It's just incredible that society is that traumatized. We usually think of this stress as something to do with returned military personnel or police officers exposed to a career of shocking experiences. Yet the amount of stress related to trauma with what many see as a safe and well-functioning society is frightening. The volume of physical, sexual, and psychological abuse, as well as a broad range of other traumatic experiences, lock so many in an inescapable survival mode. So what I mean by that is they can't even relax. They're constantly in a state of having to survive because they think the world's folding in on them. Most of the time, it seems that past trauma is unable to be reconciled or resolved with the modalities available. As a result, the mind cannot return to the present balanced enough state, and that past trauma manifests in a life of pain and desperation. The frequency of this trauma-related stress in our society is common well beyond what most people are aware of, and most societies are willing to admit. The result is a totally inadequate response, even to the point of cynical disbelief of a connection between the current irrational behavior and the past traumatic experiences. We look at our friends and family who self-harm or do drugs or behave in 1,000 different unreasonable ways and pass judgment on their lack of discipline and control and avoid them as a lost cause. But we don't see that they are doing the best they can given the disconnections in the body and mind. We don't realize that if we had experienced the same trauma in our own past, we would likely behave in exactly the same way. And if that was the case, would we also expect the same degree of alienation and rejection? I doubt it. We would at least want the opportunity to deal with the hauntings of the past so that we can return to the default balance of mind and body. And I think with a little understanding, we can all go a long way to contributing to the challenges our traumatized friends and family face in returning to a fully functioning, peaceful, and healthy life. Where are we here? Research seems to show that no single treatment modality is sufficient. At one stage, therapists employed Freudian-style verbal therapy with the belief that by talking about the experience, it would help resolve the ongoing effects. after that was found to be far less effective than initially believed, drugs were thought to be the all-encompassing panacea. That didn't work either, and drugs brought their own monstrous range of problems. I don't know the full science behind PTSD. Nevertheless, I have, a posteriori, looked to some degree at the cause-effect connections from the viewpoint of karate's potential to reconcile the seeming irreconcilable. Here are some of my thoughts. There are a number of ways post-traumatic stress manifests in the body and mind. It is a bit of a stretch to try and simplify them down too much, but at least as a start, narrowing down the way the stress manifests in the body and mind is a good way to address the issue. It also allows me to look at certain common dojo activities and suggest a potential healing connection to PTSD symptoms. The nature of Kyokushin karate, trained as a group, connecting with other students, and following the normal dojo training procedures created by Masayama, potentially provides a host of effective ways to assist in the treatment of trauma-related stress, PTSD. I also see evidence of the benefits of training for children and youths who manifest the beginnings of what could later manifest as PTSD, as well as those with certain degrees of Asperger's and mild autism. In all cases, whether the cause is some traumatic experience or a series of traumatic experiences or a pathological imbalance of chemicals or brain electricity, it seems that there are different degrees of isolation and disconnection to the surrounding environment and people. And most of this is based on my own experience with students manifesting various levels of these conditions. And I have to say, I've seen unbelievably effective results, and I've also seen cases where it just wasn't enough. So I'm not denying that psychotherapy, that sort of thing, those sort of therapies, drug therapy, have no place. I think they have a place. I just think the place they're given, if you follow the money, is too overemphasized. I think there are, and this is why I think martial arts offers such an incredible opportunity. Mirror neurons in the brain, which allow us, for example, to mirror certain behaviors and mind states, such as learning language in early childhood, empathy, and our ability to imitate others, are often, as a result of traumatic experiences, shut down. In addition, because of our lack of understanding of the behaviors and those who have suffered degrees of trauma at some stage, trauma almost, this is inverted commas, trauma almost invariably involves not being seen, not being mirrored, and not being taken into account. That's a quote. I'm just looking up the quote here. That's from a fantastic book, which I think I understand remains as the primary authority for therapists dealing with PTSD, by a writer named Bessel van der Kolk, and the book is called The Body Keeps the Score. It's a very, very good book. Here are some ways I think training may assist. One, the actions of mimicking the instructor from the beginning of the warm-up effectively reinforce the mirroring behavior that are so often missing amongst trauma victims. In addition, group repetition of set moves, for example, idogeko and kata, focused on coordinating the movements amongst everybody to a single timing, may also be very effective in mirroring. Combined with rhythmic kiais, this would have an even more effective outcome. As Jordan Peterson says, stand up straight with your shoulders back. The fifth of Soul Size 11 mottos says, the martial way is centered in posture. Strive to maintain correct posture at all times. Yoga also places a lot of emphasis on the value of a straight back. Os Vince, thanks for coming. Merci, Os. in India, you have the eightfold path of Patanjali, which is yam, niyam. So they're the things you shouldn't do and the things you should do. Asana, pranayam, pratyahara, dharan, dhyan, and samadhi. And the third one is asana. And people think that means all those incredible shapes that people bend themselves in yoga schools. But asana literally means good posture. And the objective of those various shapes is to allow the body to sit with a straight back with ease for many hours at a time. And there's been plenty of research to show that a straight spine allows the energies to flow in the body. So I encourage the kids at the dojo, for example, to learn to study at home with a straight back, to learn to sit up all the time. And karate, I've mentioned that in my other book too, karate really, along with kendo, I think I mentioned it here later, really improves the posture. Sorso once told me that you can tell which martial arts someone follows by their posture. Karate and kendo students walk with good straight posture because the techniques and stances of those arts encourage and demand good posture. And students of judo, wrestling, and these days BJJ can develop poor posture over time if they are not careful, bent over as a result of the training, techniques, and fighting style of those arts. Because, the first thing that happens with wrestling or anything is they lean forward. They're constantly leaning, grabbing, and that, you do that thousands and thousands of times, it becomes a habit. Because it is a state of mind, an attitude towards life. Yet, I beg your pardon, yet why is posture important for life as well as for good karate technique? Because it is a state of mind, an attitude towards life. Peterson says, but standing up straight with your shoulders back is not something that is only physical, because you're not only a body, you're a spirit, so to speak, a psyche as well. Standing up physically also implies and invokes and demands standing up metaphysically. Standing up means voluntarily accepting the burden of a being. Your nervous system responds in an entirely different manner when you face the demands of life voluntarily. You respond to a challenge instead of bracing for a catastrophe. So attend carefully to your posture. Quit drooping and hunching around. Speak your mind. Put your desires forward as if you had a right to them, at least the same right as others. Walk tall and gaze forthrightly ahead. Dare to be dangerous. Encourage the serotonin to flow plentifully through the neural pathways, desperate for its calming influence. So 3, the unrestrained and voluminous ki-eyes, especially in Kyokushin training, may serve to release neurological blocks, reopening pathways that have been closed, or sometimes in cases of trauma from early developmental stages in growth, form those pathways that were never fully opened in the first place. Well, Bill, good to see you. All the way from Guam. I've got to go and visit Guam one day. Hey, Ray Sutton, it was good to see you. And Ben Tipper. Goose, happy Friday, Rob Green, Mike Lorden, 23 former US military. This is just, to me, my wife was telling me about a famous Japanese actress who committed suicide recently, just a few months after she gave birth to a child. So it's possible she had a bit of post-natal depression as well. Right, safely, yes, I bet you do. My buddy, Ben Tipper, trained with me for a long time. He's a tram driver, and if you don't sit straight for a long time there, you're in trouble. Yes, that's true. A healthy body equals a healthy mind. You just can't have one without the other. It just doesn't work. They're inseparable. 4, the bilateral repetition of techniques helps the brain to equilibrate left and right hemispheres, which often show surprising disconnection and imbalance in cases of post-trauma stress, where the right limbic area of the brain is intensely active while the left hemisphere shows little or no activity at all. Bilateral techniques, especially those requiring deep concentration to execute with good technique and speed, especially would seem to help. Melinda Gates says that she sees her husband, Bill Gates, do some of the best work while walking. She says walking helps organize his brain. It is well known that the gentle bilateral motion of walking has numerous beneficial effects. Karate, especially kata, with their bilateral techniques, work similarly. 5. Working with partners, repeating set moves, as in Sambon and Ippon Kumite, or default posture technique swaps, which I've described elsewhere in the book, a drill taught to me by Shoukei Matsui when he was teaching at my dojo in 1988, starting with a single technique and building to a more complex but still manageable flow of 3 or 4 techniques. This also, I believe, serves to re-establish lost mirror neuron connections. So what I mean by default position technique swaps is you simply have 2 people standing before each other in kumite, and then one will throw a technique or a combination, maximum 2 to start with, then 3 and up to 4. Any more than that and it gets a little bit ridiculous. But what happens is I'm facing my partner, I throw a left jab. Then he immediately mirrors that with his own left jab. It's not exactly mirror because you're standing left and left. And then I'll throw a right cross and he'll throw a right cross. Then I'll throw a left, right, left inside thigh kick and he'll do left, right, left inside thigh kick. Okay, then I'll switch my feet and then throw left roundhouse. He'll switch his feet, throw left roundhouse. If he doesn't switch his feet, he hasn't mirrored it exactly. So that process, we just call that default. We call that default position technique swaps, where one side does a technique and the other one returns it. Mike, for those who don't know, everyone knows Mike's written some great books, but even before he's writing books, Mike used to write for a magazine. Give me 1 second, Mike. You'll love these, Mike. So Graham Munro, who did the photo, the beautiful photo for the new book, Mike used to write articles for a magazine called Australasian Fighting Arts, and I think it was one of the best martial arts magazines in the world. And Mike was a major contributor, if not the major contributor to it. Graham Munro, who did the cover photo for my book, was the major photographer contributor, and I had a column in it called the Cameron Quinn column, where I got to interview a lot of people going back to the late 70s. And look at this, Mike. Look what I've got here. Dozens of these. And I'm guarantee that pretty well every one that I'm pulling up here has articles by you in it. I've got dozens of them. Look, dozens. And the reason I've got these, look, one after the other. Boom, boom. These were great magazines if you haven't seen them. Unfortunately, our good buddy, Kevin Brennan, who was the editor, he was a real journalist. He, most martial arts magazines are run by martial artists. And as a result, the quality of the writing isn't always good. But Kevin Brennan was a major journalist, and he approached that magazine with a very journalistic professionalism. But he had a couple of serious, very sad events in his life. His wife, he and his wife used to run the magazine. She would do all the management. He would do the editing and so on. And she had a sudden heart attack in her 40s. And then just when he was getting ready to get the magazine going again, his daughter, I think, or his son, died in a car accident. He just went, it's very sad. But anyway, there you go. And so Mike's, when he says here, I wrote some good magazine articles in my head while walking, there you go. That's true. I encourage everyone to walk, and every now and then I get someone to come into the dojo, and they're completely not ready for training. They've neglected health for 30 years. They're obesely overweight. Their heart is in a terrible state. And I just tell them they should spend 6 months walking first. That's the best martial arts training for some people, is just to get out and walk, Okay, so let me get back to this. Working with partners, repeating set moves, or default position technique swaps. This also, I believe, serves to re-establish lost mirror neuron connections. 6, Some research has shown that quite often traumatized people can feel they are in an irrecoverable state of helplessness. Countless experiences in day-to-day life that would otherwise come and go without any major reaction in emotionally and psychologically stable people act in those having to deal with trauma as triggers that unleash the memories of trauma and along with them sometimes extreme behaviors that hurt everyone concerned. Arguably, the only way they'll get to where they are able to return to a state of inner peace and process those new events as safe and normal is to face, recognize, and ultimately neutralize the overwhelming loss of balance between the emotional and rational portions of the brain. Karate training encourages the controlled exposure to countless scenarios that teach the student to recognize that one, the nature of the training encourages mushin, a calm state of mind under pressure through breath control and awareness, despite the challenges deliberately presented. Two, the student is in a safe environment surrounded by trustworthy training partners who only have their interest at heart, and by training together, they grow together. And three, training is designed to present challenging situations and so show us that although there are many events we cannot control, I'm just going to do an edit there. What we can control is the way we process them internally. The nature of trauma is such that even the smallest and most innocent action can trigger a landslide of stressful and out of control reactions. By relearning to maintain control of our emotional reactions, we can return to an equilibrated state of calm. 7, heart rate variability. This is something I think everyone needs to know and understand. And I'm always surprised how few martial arts instructors who are in a position of responsibility, particularly training champions and fighters and so on, I'm always surprised at how little they know about heart rate variability. So I want to talk about that. Heart rate variability is a measure of the variations in the time between heartbeats. So, you know, when you take your heartbeat, and if you feel it carefully, it goes dun, 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 and then it might go dun, 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 dun. And that variability is very, very valuable. It's not something we really take much notice of, but research shows that whilst the exact cause is not clearly understood, there is a strong correlation between the amplitude of the variability and emotional well-being. Those who suffer from nervous PTSD and other similar conditions demonstrate a narrow HRV, heart rate variability amplitude, connected to a higher agitated rate of respiration. It has been demonstrated many times over the years that activities such as martial arts training, as well as meditation, serve to calm the mind, as well as reduce the average respiration rate. I know from experience that when you meditate long and you bring the mind down, the breathing rate drops to less than 2 breaths a minute. And I think sometimes, I don't know what the average is, maybe it's 6 to 10 to 12 breaths a minute or so. But when you meditate, and I have meditated with, I've got a good buddy who meditates. He's one of the world's great mathematicians and scientists who just happens to meditate like 8 hours a night. And I've meditated with him numerous times. And what'll happen is you'll hear his breathing. And then you'll just hear his breath. And then it'll stop. And his breath will stop for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. And then he'll go, and he'll go back to breathing. And I ask him about it. He just says, well, the body breathes when it needs to. If it doesn't need to breathe, it's not going to breathe. And when you meditate deeply, one of the physical processes of deep meditation is that you get a hyperoxygenation of the body. So the rate of carbonization plummets, and so the need to breathe drops considerably. It has been demonstrated many times over the years that activities such as martial arts training, as well as meditation, serve to calm the mind, as well as reduce the average respiration rate. Ongoing research has verified that the heart rate variability amplitude responds very positively to in short periods of various types of meditation breathing, which in turn serves to re-establish a state of mental calm and inner peace. The slower the rate of respiration, the greater HRV amplitude, the calmer and more in balance the consciousness. This is also a solid argument for increasing the length of quiet sitting in Seiza before and after training, especially I would suggest after training, so that the student is given the opportunity to calm down. If this is practiced daily after training, the general feeling of calmness and inner peace would expand over time, beneficial to not just those who suffer from PTSD, but to all. Bessel van der Kolk, in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, describes the connection between this heart rate variability and the autonomic nervous system in a succinct and useful way. The two branches of the autonomic system, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, work in coordination with each other to regulate the body's energy use and flow. The SNS, sympathetic nervous system, arouses energy, including the fight or flight response, partly through triggering the adrenals to secrete adrenaline, resulting in an increased heart rate and blood pressure. The parasympathetic nervous system acts to keep all of that in balance. It sparks off the release of acetylcholine, which checks arousal, slows down the heart rate, relaxes muscles, and returns the breathing to normal. Van der Kolk says there is a simple way to experience these two systems for yourself. Whenever you take a deep breath, you activate the sympathetic nervous system. The resulting burst of adrenaline speeds up your heart, which explains why many athletes take a few short, deep breaths before starting competition. Exhaling, in turn, activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which slows down the heart. If you take a yoga or meditation class, your instructor will probably urge you to pay particular attention to the exhalation, since deep, long breaths out help calm you down. As we breathe, we continually speed up and slow down the heart, and because of that, the interval between two successive heartbeats is never precisely the same. A measurement called heart rate variability can be used to test the flexibility of this system, and good heart rate variability, the more fluctuation the better, is a sign that the brake and accelerator in your arousal system are both functioning properly and in balance. And I love that. That's the quote from Van der Kolk. The brake and accelerator in your arousal system are both functioning properly and in balance. And we know with people who have degrees of trauma, that brake and accelerator are out of control. 1 second you're sitting there, everything's great. Then all of a sudden, the acceleration of emotional charge is just crazy, and they can't put the brake on, even if they want to. And so when Van der Kolk says that there's a very good high correlation between a good HRV, or the heart rate variability, and the flexibility of the system, that's a sign that the brake and accelerator are working well. That sums up a lot. This suggests, not surprisingly, as yoga has been saying for millennia, that there is a powerful link between the breath and the state of calm inner peace. Stress is known to disrupt the normal HRV, heart rate variability spectrum, and learning how to circumvent the debilitating influences of stress is one of the purposes of meditation. Breath is the cord that ties the spirit to the body. Scientifically, the breathing is controlled by the deep reptilian brain, one of the primary areas affected by trauma-related stress. Deep breathing, including karate's ibuki and nogare breathing, and the calm, conscious breathing of meditation can, and definitely should, be used to contribute to any healing processes sought to relieve sufferers of PTSD of the often overwhelming ongoing stresses. I believe breath-focused training should be a part of every single training session and part of every morning training routine, whether a champion fighter training for the next world tournament or a 60-year-old trainer for health and balance. The periods of meditation before and after training, which can and perhaps should be expanded to longer periods outside of training as well, bring awareness of the breath. In the Indian yogic traditions, the gaze, even with the eyes closed, is brought gently upwards and inwards to what would be commonly called the spiritual eye, at a point above, slightly between, and slightly behind and between the eyebrows. So you don't cross your eyes, you look upwards into the distance, and that brings the energy to here. This area closely corresponds to the medial prefrontal cortex portion of the brain, which has numerous functions connected to keeping an eye on the state of things and selecting appropriate responses to events as they occur around us. The deep concentration and breathing techniques of meditation, I believe, contribute to the rebalancing of the connections between the rational and emotional areas of the brain, a connection and function that appears to be compromised in people who have suffered severe trauma. That's why it's so sad to see karate people perform Sanshin and Tensho like they're a test of strength. Well, that's spot on. And in fact, thanks for reminding me, because I was going to say, Mike, that it's very difficult to ask a class full of students to stand there and do deep breathing, focused, concentrated breathing. So you get them to do it in Sanshin and Tensho. But what I kind of steer away from doing, I may have spoken about it before, I have this theory that doing Tensho too hard can affect the blood pressure. And I think you hit the nail on the head right there. People treat it as a test of strength. I mean, how hard can you really get hard? But the value of it is in the breathing. So the focus should be on the breath, not the tension. 9, gaze. For students who have mild degrees of Asperger's, regular dojo training has proven repeatedly to provide tremendous benefits for many. One simple training habit that helps is the need to focus the gaze on the eyes of the training partner. Those who have Asperger's syndrome often avoid eye contact. The expectation to focus on their training partner's eyes can help. There are drills that can be used to help normalize the tendency to avoid eye contact, especially good in groups of trusted training partners. Other areas that karate training can help those with Asperger's syndrome include gaining control of facial expressions and physical postures, improve motor skill development, often delayed in these cases, and by working to become a good training partner in the dojo, improve their sense of empathy for others. 10, group training helps create a mindset of responsibility and ownership. These days, it often seems that people encourage the not it's been a while since I wrote this and I can't understand what I'm trying to say. These days, it often seems that people encourage that maybe, the notion, I say, it's changed it. People encourage the notion that rights trump responsibilities, but as John D. Rockefeller reminded us, every right implies a responsibility, every opportunity an obligation, every possession a duty. As the student rises through the ranks, his efforts bring certain rights in the dojo, but with those rights comes an increasing level of responsibility. As the student's position changes in the dojo's natural hierarchy, so also is more expected of him. And if the balance is right, she easily and naturally rises to the occasion. This serves well in every aspect of the student's life outside of the dojo as well. Single-minded focus, ownership, accountability, and responsibility, the primary qualities of staying above the line, which demonstrates character and integrity. And here, a little more than other areas of this book, It is important to remind the reader that I'm very much addressing both male and female students, as both have a natural and healthy role to play in healthy societies and hierarchies. Yet, how are these taught today? How much emphasis is placed on really developing these core qualities beyond a token lip service? Especially when you consider what seems to be a trend in schools, in particularly the public school system, to somewhat cauterize the sound and healthy growth of boys, which to some people is seen as typical male dominant attempt to minimize girls, but in fact has absolutely nothing to do with it, through reducing certain traditional development patterns, such as tough competitive sport. The methods used to deal with bullies in an effort to reduce or even remove differences between boys and girls, differences which are in fact normal, natural, and healthy. Karate training, and to a good degree martial arts training in general, is one of those ways. When my daughter was at school, I think they started to go through through my full breathing, not heavy breathing. They started to go through this thing. I remember going to the athletics carnival, and all the kids that would finish the 60-meter sprint or whatever, there were people at the end giving them ribbons. And my daughter showed me her ribbon, and it was like, great work, participation ribbon. And I asked someone, what happens to first, second, and third place ribbons? And said, oh no, we got rid of those. It encourages an unhealthy degree of competitiveness. We want kids to understand that the most important thing is they participate. And you're joking, aren't you? I mean, really? There isn't an organism from single cell organisms all the way up that survives without a degree of competitiveness, 11, male role models in the dojo. I'm not familiar with trends of single-parent families in countries outside of Australia. In Australia, however, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, 15% of families are single-parent, and that was 8 years ago. Of these, more than 60%, 67% had dependents, and 84% were single-mother families. There is no doubt that the absence of quality male role models in the lives of growing children has impact. Whole books can be and have been written on the subject. But here I just want to mention the incredible benefits seen when single-parent children, boys and girls both, continue training in a dojo. This is one area where team sports has similar benefits. For single mother families, get the kids along to the dojo where they mix with many great role models that may be missing in their life in general. And I've got a footnote. I was a single parent. I've got a footnote. As a single parent myself, from when my children were preschool, I took more than an average interest in this. I honor and respect the efforts of all parents to do the best they can in raising well-balanced kids, fully ready to participate in society. And the concentrated focus during training means that time spent is by nature good quality time, an important factor that is sometimes missed in two-parent homes when the well-meaning father is often absent more than he'd like due to work commitments. Mentors matter, and senior students in the dojo make for outstanding mentors and role models. I've got a quote here from the Roadie, as in RHODE, the Roadie show. I don't even know. This has been so long since I wrote this. I'm not even sure if this is still current. But let me just paste in the link to this. You might find it interesting. A quote from the Roadie show: the gender role models in families are constantly changing with our society. There are less definitive characteristics of child rearing for mothers and fathers. Mum can coach baseball and dad can cook dinner each night, but the role of each gender in the development of positive relationships in children is constant. 12, the Dojo Kun. At the end of training, the Dojo Kun, the Kyokushin training oath, is usually recited as a group. It is done with vigor and volition. In an article entitled Speak with Love, How Your Words Literally Restructure Your Brain, author Raven Fon wrote, the words you choose to use can literally change your brain. Dr. Andrew Newberg, a neuroscientist at Thomas Jefferson University, and Mark Waldman, a communications expert, collaborated on a book, Words Can Change Your Brain. In it, they wrote, a single word has the power to influence the expression of genes that regulate physical and emotional stress. When we use words filled with positivity like love and peace and so on, we can alter how our brain functions by increasing cognitive reasoning and strengthening areas in our frontal lobes. Using positive words more often than negative ones can kickstart the motivational centers of the brain, propelling them into action. On the opposite end of the spectrum, when we use negative words, we're preventing certain neurochemicals from being produced, which contribute to stress management. Each and every one of us are initially hand-wired to worry. It's how our primal brain protects us from dangerous situations for survival. An excerpt from the book tells how using the right words can literally change our reality. By holding a positive and optimistic word in your mind, you simulate frontal lobe activity. This area includes specific language centers that connect directly to the motor cortex responsible for moving you into action. I'm becoming conscious that this is getting a little long-winded, but it literally almost finishes. I haven't finished it, but I'll just read the last chapter, or the last paragraph. The Dojo Kun contains a profound but succinct philosophy that represents, in part, a distillation of the philosophy of Kyokushin. On a personal and internal level, the group recitation of the Dojo Kun acts exactly in the way Fon's article suggests. In addition, it makes a lot of sense that repeating the uplifting words of the Dojo Oath as part of a group of trusted training partners also serves in a powerful way to help dissociated students dealing with various kinds of trauma with the challenge to reconnect with others. So there you go, Marco, positive, negative reinforcement, Pat, next level. Yes, good on you, Patty. We're happy for you too. I'm glad that you're going to that next level of. Patty's also in Melbourne, so we're thinking of you down there. So anyway, that was a large section on the section that I'm writing about using karate as a modality of trauma stress reduction. I think it's really valuable, and that's not to say that everyone that loves karate has their head together. That's not the case. In fact, I've met too many rat bags to know better. But what it does is, if these modalities are taken into mind and are considered in relation to current trends in therapies, stress therapies, I think martial arts are fantastic. I was talking to my good buddy Mitch Kachonda. If you're there, we get together once a week. Mitch is I've mentioned before, an athletic development coach, one of the best in the world, and he was saying that his team, the King Sports International team, recommend that children do 4 activities: gymnastics, soccer, because of the eye-foot coordination as opposed to eye-hand coordination, gymnastics, soccer, martial arts, and it'll come to me. These are the 4 gymnastics, soccer, martial arts, and one other activity, which all provide a very solid, neurologically balanced, equilibrated, all-round physical foundation for future development. I'm surprised I forgot which 4th one it was. It'll come to me. So that's that section from the book about using martial arts as trauma therapy. Some dojos nowadays, the dojo kun has been omitted since some teachers say it might offend some people. I can't believe that, alluding to some sort of cult ritual, or those non-religious. Look, Tigray, I had a guy walk in with his wife once and said, we really want to train, but we have a little trouble with the dojo kun and we have trouble with the bowing. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we don't like to bow down to anyone. And I said, well, there's two ways to look at it. You're actually bowing down to yourself. It's also just, it's like shaking hands, except in the East, they don't shake hands, they bow. And they said, we still have trouble. Can we not do it? I said, no. If you're not willing to bow, and if you're not willing to say the dojo kun, you're better off going somewhere else, because you just won't fit in. You're just better off without those sort of personalities in the dojo. They're too disruptive. They could argue all they want, but they're never going to get an agreement out of me that that's the right attitude. I spent too many years amongst too many good people to know that. Anyway, I'm going to wind it up there. Thank you for that. I hope, look, there was very little discussion, which kind of sometimes makes me think people are getting a little tired of hearing but the numbers have remained consistent, so that's a good thing. I hope you got something out of that. Yes, that's true. I agree with you, Tigray. Thanks for tuning in once again. I hope that made you at least think there really is some value in the martial arts as a form of therapy. I'm annoyed I can't remember the fourth one. There was gymnastics, martial arts. They make sense. Soccer makes sense. What's the fourth one, Mitch? If you're watching, type it in. It was good to see you, Mike. Always nice to see your name pop up there, Mike Lorden. Daniel Langworthy, hope you're going well down there. As soon as this lockdown's sorted out, we'll work something out with Mark Matthews, and I'll be back down for some seminars. Thank you again, everybody. Mike Clark, appreciate it very much, and I appreciate your communication. No, it wasn't swimming. I know that's bilateral, but it's not swimming. Although I have to say, thanks for bringing it up, Tigray. Well, thank you. Nice, good, Torbjörn. Thanks. And Paul, arigato gozaimashita. I taught my kids to swim before they could walk. My kids would literally crawl to the edge of the pool and throw themselves in the pool and sink and then come back up, and literally at 4, 5, 6 months years old. And it was always a surprise to people. Back then, things were different. I had a swimming pool at home, and I would literally take my 6-month-old kids and go plonk and drop them in the pool, and people would freak. But it's really important, I think, growing up in an environment with beaches, with rips and tides and pools everywhere. If the kids can't swim, it's a level of danger. So it's very easy to teach a child to swim. It's easier to teach a child to swim than it is to teach them to walk, because it's buoyant. There's no weight bearing, so their muscles don't need to have developed as much. But anyway, swimming is very good. That's that bilateral part of it. It's not the fourth one. No, I'm gutted. I don't remember. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Frederick. Thanks, everybody. Us, appreciate your time. And once again, if you're not subscribed, please do so. It really makes a difference. I'm trying to get my subscribers up to 1,000 subscribers. I'm at around 750 at the moment. So share the video. That's the best way. Share a link and say to your friends, subscribe to this. You really enjoy it, and hopefully they will. And if everybody shares and asks their friends to subscribe, it could make a difference. Pass it around to your dojo friends. Make sure everybody gets in. Even if they can't tune in to the live sessions, they can get along and watch the sessions later on. I think that'd be fantastic. So thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. And Aussies, have a great long weekend. And Queensland at least. And we'll see you next time. See you on Monday. Us.